Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murderer. We're also welcoming back to the show the full panel. So we're at full power today, guys. Let's start at the top with Big Jeff and say hello and good morning, Big Jeff.
Hey, Jeff, good morning. Glad to be here. It's really, in a lot of ways, very exciting to be kicking off MAM 2. In a lot of ways, it's a little bit melancholy, too, because, when MAM 2 first came out, Kathleen Zellner was in the midst of her appeal that finally got finished only earlier this year. And it was kind of an active story. And as of right now, MAM 2, like MAM 1, is a story that's run its course in a lot of ways, except for one aspect that we'll get to eventually. And has obviously concluded in a way. The boys aren't walking yet. That's what we're here for. We're going to keep on talking till they're walking. Hasn't concluded that way yet, and some of the things that happen are just going to make your blood boil. So, one of the reasons why I feel like I'm here is to sort of raise awareness of, hypocrisy and corruption within the courts, and that's what we have to rail against, irrespective of who it's against, or irrespective of political party or anything. So I'm looking forward to weighing in on MAM 2. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Big Jeff. I think just to add a little bit to what you said, MAM 2 is a different beast than MAM 1. That's all I kind of want to comment on it. It's a different documentary series. It flows different. It feels different. And with that said, we'll move right into saying hello to Jack. Good morning, Jack.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, I have to agree. Ma'am too is a different beast altogether. With showcasing a lot of Kathleen Zellner's her strengths and her ability to get the best experts to examine evidence and that kind of thing. And actually, as I mentioned earlier, before we started recording, I started reviewing Ma'am Part 2, Episode 1, and I'd forgotten because it's been a minute since I watched this. And she got the RAV, and just all kinds of things that, and truth be told, is the RAV. We talked about this the other day. The RAV is the key piece of evidence that she needs right now. More than anything, she needs that RAV. Anyway, going to be great taking this apart. So let's do it.
Thank you, Jack. And Kelly, good evening.
Good evening. It's good to be back. I'm actually really excited to do MAM 2, for all the reasons that you guys already suggested, and I think it's more because I'm looking forward to enjoying the journey. Like, we're watching this with hindsight of where Kathleen's going now, and it's going to be really not fun, because this is not something fun to watch because the circumstance, what we're watching about two innocent men, but it's just going to be interesting to see how things have evolved. And we're about to go through a journey, another journey again, to see the then and now the now. So again, there's obviously bits in this that she's going to address, which I'm more than happy to obviously get more into when we go along, which is like the blood and all the DNA, because I think the DNA was, such a important thing to the case, regardless how you think it got there and who planted it, if it was even planted. I'm just looking forward to just going on this journey with you guys. So ready to start when you guys are.
Awesome, Kel. Thank you. Really appreciate those comments. And we have one last thing to say, and that is, we'd really like to welcome back Dr. Silkman to the show. He's back, everybody. He's back.
It's really great to be back, and a big hello to everyone in chat. Yes, I echo everyone's words. I'm really looking forward to MAM 2. MAM 2 for me got me really excited because we get to meet Kathleen Zellner and her team of experts. And what I found really stimulating, especially in MAM 2, was the journey that both Stephen and Brendan went on in terms of like their respective attorneys looking after their best interests. And oh boy, do we find out a lot of shenanigans that happen, especially with Brendan. But I really like MAM 2, mainly for the forensics and the fact that my background is in DNA, and that really stimulated my appetite. So guys, I'm really looking forward to it. But I just want to make a quick point. In my absence, when I wasn't well, you guys did an incredible amount of stuff, and you guys got the biggest views when I wasn't on the team. So I hope I don't drag everybody down.
Well, you know, we might have to put the plank out the ship here, Dr. Silkman. You gotta keep it up. Keep your end of the bargain.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
But all kidding aside, Dr. Silkman, it really is a great to have you back. It is great to be full power, full team for the first episode. And the only thing is that this takes a little bit pressure off of everybody. Welcoming Jack as a permanent seat on the podcast, you know, eases up a little bit for everybody. We all have a little bit less time in every episode, but that's totally fine. We're just going to have to be there for each other. And as we move on, it gives the opportunity for each one of you panelists to take a week off if you need to. And we can still continue to move on with the show. So I think that having the 5 of us here is really going to lend itself to this second season that we're about to start. So if there isn't any other comments, let's get right to it. And if I remember correctly, all hell breaks loose in Manitowoc.
Well, he is one of Northeast Wisconsin's most notorious murderers. And now a new documentary is set to air about the life and crimes of Stephen Avery.
From his 2003 release from prison for a crime he did not commit, all the way through his 2007 conviction for Halbach's murder, Stephen Avery's notoriety has been followed by the people in Northeast Wisconsin. And now in a 10-part series being released on Netflix next month, Making a Murderer.
Many people in this community we talk to are not interested in anything dealing with Avery.
You get wrongly convicted, and then all of a sudden you do that. You get a second chance, and you blow it.
In response to the news of the documentary, the Halbach family says, "We are saddened to learn that individuals and corporations continue to create entertainment and to seek profit from our loss. We continue to hope that the story of Teresa's life brings goodness to the world."
Okay, so I don't want to stop it so quickly, guys, but is that really the point of the documentary, to profit off of a loss of someone, or is there kind of something else to this? It's a little oversimplification.
I think it's a little bit of oversimplification, Jeff. You know, the first commenter, the lady who said, you know, to get a second chance and then all of a sudden go off and blow it. It's one of the primary reasons why the people on this panel just don't believe it, right? Remember, Teresa Halbach going missing is man miracle number 1, and it's miraculous that she went time. It was so convenient for the state of a time to go missing. But more to your point, as to, you know, whether this is about exploitation and entertainment, I don't think so. This is an expose on corruption in a lot of ways.
I think it was a bit of a cheap shot too that can be taken at anyone in any case. It didn't necessarily have to be this case. You see it in other cases as well. Yeah, people make money. We can't. That doesn't stop no matter what we do. The money makes the world go around, and it, you know, in this instance here, yeah, people are going to make money. They make it through the prison system, the courts, the police officers, the clerks, the lawyers, both sides, not just the defense lawyers, prosecutors, ADAs. You know, I mean, I've heard it so often. it's almost offensive to me now. And now maybe I shouldn't feel that way, but everyone in this makes money, period. We don't, obviously. We're doing this because like Jeff said, we're taking a stand against the corruption and what we see is wrong. But these players in this adversarial process, every one of them, they're all making money.
Well, I'd just like to point out that people like Ken Kratz didn't seem to have any problem being in the limelight and making or attempting to make a name for himself in this space. So, as you said, Jack, it comes from both sides. It's not just a documentary crew. It's also Ken Kratz trying to get a book deal, Ken Kratz trying to do this, other people involved. We've seen Griesbach profit from this. We've seen other people profit from this. It's not just one-sided.
If I could just sort of point out, it goes to show the impact that Making a Murderer had on the community, especially the local community, in which the reporter said that nobody wanted to talk about anything to do with Avery. And it's remarkable how the attitude of certain people have already condemned Stephen Avery, right? They've already made up their mind. It never enters their mind that Stephen Avery may have been wrongfully convicted. Same with Brendan Dassey. A lot of the people that were shown there in the documentary are of the firm belief that both of them are guilty. So to me, that also shows the balance of the documentarians as well. They're not only showing positive comments, they're also showing negative ones as well. You know, often Making a Murderer gets heavily criticized of being biased, but quite clearly here, it is touching on sensitive areas and sensitive subjects, especially with the family. And the Hallbach family have remained, as we all know, guys, very, very quiet in all of this. And I could understand their pain and anguish of losing a loved one. That's a terrible tragedy. But at the end of the day, guys, you want to make sure that the correct person or people are in prison for committing this crime. And we've got to ask the hard questions. We just can't let it go.
I was actually going to address what Dr. Silkman just did, so I won't repeat or go over that because it's already been said. But I think from where we kind of hear now, I think there is still a bit of a division in the community still. I do believe that there's feedback that there is a lot of locals that still believe Stephen Avery is guilty. And then you hear the other side where I'm not sure whether it had any reflection of watching Making a Murderer, but there is other locals that believe he's innocent and that he was just done over by law enforcement. And a lot of the locals, from what I have heard in the community, believe that it always ties back to 1985, that he was wrongfully convicted, and the law enforcement wanted to stop the depositions and stop the lawsuits. So I kind of wanted to say that because it's just interesting that exactly what Dr. Silkman said, people talk about this being biased, but right here we're seeing a really good balance of the negative comments and the negative feedback from the locals and the thoughts that were happening in real time. So yeah, I just wanted to address that as well, that, you know, locals still to this day aren't still convinced that Stephen Avery is innocent either, even after 2 documentaries, even after hearing that the greatest exoneree lawyer of the world has taken his case, and she's been very public and said, I don't take people that are guilty, and that still hasn't swung the needle.
Kelly, your comments really lead into what I wanted to add, and that's just my own personal perspective. I was back in Wisconsin for this, and I spoke to some extended family members. And at the time, I'll never forget it. It was before I had even seen the documentary, but it was so thick in the community that everybody was talking about it. I mean, I believe most of America was talking about it. It was one of Netflix's first real big homegrown docuseries. And the story that I was told while I was in Green Bay to go to a Green Bay Packers game was, and I'll never forget it, the extended family member said to me, I don't care what any documentary says. Stephen Avery is guilty, and there's nothing you can say that can change my mind. And those words have reverberated with me since. And I hope to think, at least in my mind, I like to think that if that person had watched our podcast and had completed season 1, that they might not be thinking that anymore. So that's how I approach season 1, and that's how I approach season 2. If you knew what we knew, what we laid out, would you still have that opinion? And that kind of is a driving force for me. So that I'll just leave it at that. But I really appreciate your guys' comments.
But if I could just quickly add, I remember in season number 1, there were law enforcement officers that, despite Stephen Avery's exoneration for the sexual assault of Penny Bernstein, there were law enforcement officers that still believed in his guilt. So the disturbing factor is that even if you're proven to have been completely innocent and not present when the crime took place, there are those that have already made up their mind. And Jeff, you said it. You said it. If you, even your own family member said, I don't give a stuff what anybody says in any documentary. I believe in that person's guilt or innocence. So there are individuals in society that are, no matter, they're polarized, as Kelly pointed out. They've got either one thing in their mind, guilt, or another, not guilty. So this case or these cases have polarized the community.
Well, I think that, Jeff, you should have disclosed that you were related to Michael Kelly before we started the podcast. But really, thinking about O'Kelly, this ties in with what Dr. Silkman just said. There's a reason, warranted or not, why Michael Kelly made the statement, that this is a nasty family, a family tree that only has one branch and needs to be put down. The Averys had a bad reputation in the community, and I just wonder how much that bad reputation carried over to this firmness and belief that Stephen was guilty, and of course that reputation being fostered by the poisoning of the jury pool with the March 1 press conference sort of exasperated an already bad situation for Stephen and Brendan. So, I see that, and it's interesting to me that that sort of hyper-focused in the local community who has an understanding or this bias based on this reputation, whether that reputation is deserved or not, it certainly bled onto Stephen.
I'd like to add one more thing, and this is taking a step outside of what we're talking about, necessarily the documentary. However, it is from someone that's a guilter that made a comment, and I posted this on Discord. I'm not sure if Dr. Silkman or anyone else has had a chance to read it, but this pertains to what's going on now. That's with Sawinski, the new phone call, etc. And basically, this guilter is saying that Zellner has lied. That this phone call, she's just grasping at it and making this attempt to get back into court without any proof whatsoever, and not taking in consideration of these phone calls being held and not being released until this year. That Manitowoc held on to these, a couple of these DVDs, wherever the hell they were. Suddenly they appear. And understanding, for a police force, people local having their officers or their law enforcement agency play that kind of game with the criminal justice system, and not understanding that this is part of the problem within our system in America, and it has to stop. Convict the bad people. Don't go after and wrongly convict people that aren't guilty just because you're trying to sell a story. That's a big part of. That's what I wanted to say, though.
making a murderer.
Making a murderer.
Making a murderer. Making
a murderer.
I hadn't even heard about this until about a week ago. Now everybody's talking about it.
People around the world.
millions of views.
A sea of angry social media are extremely outraged.
Stephen Avery's lawyers now are rock stars. People love
Sex
him.
symbol.
Good morning, heartthrobs.
Celebrities have taken to social media.
Celebrities, they've been tweeting
Like crazy.
Everyone is talking about this docuseries.
Petitions calling for the release of Stephen Avery continue to grow.
the most activity the site has ever seen.
There are now calls for the president himself to get involved.
In a lengthy response, the White House wrote in part, since Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey are both state prisoners, the president cannot pardon them. A pardon in this case would need to be issued at the state level by the appropriate authorities.
The state's governor, Scott Walker, refused.
People watching a TV series calling for a pardon without having little or no knowledge of major pieces of evidence.
The governor has not seen making.
Well, that really encapsulates what we see today with all the groups like ours, yours, and many others, in which we're trying to educate the wider public about the evidence and what's wrong with the evidence. And it's interesting how that gentleman was having a go at basically the viewers of Netflix saying, you know, how can you possibly say Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey are innocent when you haven't gone into depth about looking at the forensic evidence and why Stephen's in prison and why Brendan's in prison? Well, groups like you, Jeff, Foul Play and others have spent an incredible amount of time not just looking at documentaries, but going back to the primary information, the primary literature, and have gone through phone calls and everything else, and we've dug deep. And the amount of things that we're finding now is just truly shocking. And so, you know, that really encapsulated basically what he was saying is, hey, don't ask the hard questions. Just accept that the prosecuting attorneys did a good job and these two guys are in prison because they're guilty. They don't want people like us to ask the hard questions.
The governor is a hypocrite because he's sitting there saying people watched a documentary and they didn't go further into details or know about the evidence or talk about the evidence, yet he's next, like you see it on the screen, the reporter says, yet the governor has not seen Making a Murderer. So he's making assumptions about the same thing or based on the same thing that he's whinging about everyone else. How does he know that Making a Murderer didn't cover the things that weren't, that he deemed relevant in the case? He hasn't even watched it. It's absolutely pathetic excuse to sit there and say you guys needed like take into consideration of what really happened, yet he hasn't taken the time out to even educate or educate or watch the show himself and learn from what they have presented. It's ridiculous.
If I can just add to what Kelly just said, that's exactly what Mr. Kratz did in his first edition of his book, right? Because on Foul Play, we covered his book. We spent nearly a year going over his book. And, you know, he made a big song and dance that a lot of the forensic evidence, a lot of the other things as well, were not covered in Making a Murderer #1. But he had to eat his words when Making a Murderer 2 came out and looked at all the pieces of forensic evidence that Ken Kratz said wasn't covered in MAM 1, which necessitated that he had to write another edition to cover MAM 2. And we all know, and you can ask Jack, he did such a shocking job in that second edition trying to counteract Kathleen Zellner. The bottom line is, Kathleen Zellner, whether you like her or you don't, she's had a massive impact on this case.
Yeah, look what they did after she released her PCR in 2017. What did Calumet do? They immediately opened an investigation and went and re-interviewed 50 people or whatever, however many it was. It's a huge list. They interviewed people they didn't even interview the first time.
Case 02.
That's right. She had a massive impact. Absolutely.
You best believe they'll be doing it right now as we speak as well. You can't tell me the state hasn't opened up another little case, so we'll call it 2.022 right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dr. Silkman, was that along the point that you made with Ken Kratz, one of the particular pieces of evidence that Ken Kratz wailed about was the hood latch swab. We talked about that, a little bit of it, right? They didn't learn.
Correct.
They didn't talk at all about the hood latch swab, and I think we'll get into it. But if you remember us railing about item FL, the
correct.
hood latch swab is as fishy as item FL, and even more so. So
correct.
We'll get to it.
We will. And the big catch cry, of course, was sweat DNA, right? And boy, did that come did that come back to bite.
Making a murderer, but calls it one-sided.
Documentaries tend to offer a kind of a balanced approach. It's really not a documentary.
I'm going to do everything in my power to free Steve Avery, and then I'm coming after you.
Viewers made death threats against Kratz and his family. His Yelp page is under an active cleanup alert because of all the negative comments.
I hope your daughter gets raped and murdered.
A decade later, you have no concern that some of you...
I mean, I just want to make a point. I shouldn't have to make a point of this, but, Ken Kratz does not deserve any of that. He doesn't deserve to be threatened, even if he did break the law, even if he did. There's no place for that ever. Maybe I don't need to address it, but I just felt the need to say something, that it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, you don't deserve to be threatened like that.
I think we all 100% agree with that.
No, he doesn't deserve that. But the reality is, what did Mr. Kratz expect? No blowback at all? I mean, we know how society is, right? There's such a cross section from the lunatic fringe to those who take it in more of a philosophical viewpoint. There are always going to be people that are going to fight back because they feel so frustrated, because when you see Mam 1, it really pumps you up. It really gets you angry. And how many people have watched Making a Murderer 1 episode after the other? They binge watched the whole lot. And after 10 hours, your head is full. You're so angry. And of course, who are the bad guys? Well, Ken Kratz, Fallon, Garn, the judges. People are taking out their anger on those individuals because they believe proper justice hasn't been served. So I know the hateful comments that were directed to Kratz was shameful and a terrible thing. But if you notice, guys, Fallon, it didn't happen to Fallon. It didn't happen to Garn. It specifically happened to Kratz. And the question has to be, why? Why was he a magnet for all of this negativity?
Well, like we saw in episode 10, when these sexual texting allegations came out, I think for me, that's the magnifier.
It's hypocrisy 101, right? Right in our face. And everything that happened, and then you add on to it, everybody could see how badly Brendan got screwed. And Kratz was at the head of that. People only take hypocrisy for so long, and they'll blow.
Your people might have done something inappropriate with the evidence?
No, I do not.
Zero.
Sheriff Robert Herman is getting emails from all over the world. Some he calls hate mail.
Your department is as crooked as they come. I hope you all rot in hell. That I got this afternoon.
For those who think Stephen Avery didn't do it, it comes down to one prominent attorney famous for wrongful convictions who says she's about to turn this case upside down.
Stephen Avery has a new high-profile lawyer.
Kathleen Zellner is famous for exonerating 17 other men of wrongful convictions.
Zellner wasting no time in criticizing former prosecutor Ken Kratz for his role in putting Avery behind bars.
Saying, quote, the Zellner law firm is looking forward to adding Mr. Avery to its long list of wrongful conviction exonerations.
Now, prosecutor Ken Kratz alleges important evidence was left out of the documentary.
What is the most persuasive evidence that the series left out?
The DNA that was found on the hood latch was the most persuasive. His sweaty hands reached underneath the hood and got onto the hood latch. You can't.
Yeah, I think somebody was just talking about this, weren't we?
You know, this episode is designed to piss me right off. And, well, I mean, in all fairness, I'll make it short. This was his catch cry, sweat DNA, right? And it's very, very interesting. The blood in the RAV, and Kelly, the whole panel, has discussed about the importance of the blood in the RAV. If that wasn't important enough, the state needed another DNA sample that wasn't blood. And lo and behold, you find it underneath the hood, right? Which is implying that if Stephen Avery was such a good shedder of DNA, how come his touch DNA isn't everywhere in that RAV? And it's not. So, you know, it's really interesting that Kratz makes this almighty statement about the hood latch swab, the sweat DNA, but keeps it very, very quiet that you don't find Stephen's touch DNA anywhere else, right? So it's very inconsistent.
And how did he sweat through gloves and no fingerprints? Come on.
Correct.
Well,
Correct.
As long as we're piling on, we have to remember that the hood latch swab was not discovered until March, right? After what? After Brendan's coerced confession. And who was it that suggested that Stephen went under the hood? Was it
Fassbender?
It was
Fassbender.
So they don't even. So you know their case is failing. As I've said many times, the property bond is up. They need something else to throw at Stephen to increase the bail. So the property bond is not enough. They coerce Brendan's confession. They go and make this search. They miraculously discover item FL. And what else did they discover at the same time? This DNA under the hood latch. As the crooked Fassbender and Wiegert directed Brendan to talk about her being shot in the garage because there was 6 inches of snow on the ground. They couldn't find the FL anywhere but inside the garage because everything else was unsearchable. But where else could you search? You could search the RAF because that's in custody. He went under the hood miraculously after all this time, right? I mean, DNA doesn't last. This stuff doesn't last forever on the outside, especially with the techniques that they only had in 2005. They find the hood latch after coercing Brendan to say, without him initiating the conversation, oh, he went under the hood. What for? You know, it is as phony as FL is for all the reasons that were just listed by the
149 days, touch DNA. And I'm no scientist, but I think Dr. Silkman will tell you after a couple of weeks that stuff degrades rapidly.
Correct. And they were really excellent points there that you made, Big Jeff. And, you know, when you think about it, Brendan Dassey never talked about Teresa Halbach or the victim being shot in the head. Brendan Dassey never disclosed the fact that his uncle went underneath the hood. These were suggestions by Fassbender and Wiegert. And it's pretty obvious because what they were trying to do was to somehow corroborate the story that Brendan Dassey was saying. And what better way to do it? Well, miraculously, as Big Jeff said, you find a bullet. And it just happened to have Teresa Halbach's DNA. You do not find Teresa Halbach's DNA in the entire salvage yard apart from her RAV. So the only other place you find Teresa Halbach's DNA is on the magic bullet, right? And you miraculously find Stephen Avery's DNA only Stephen Avery's DNA on the hood latch, right? You could imagine how many people have touched that hood latch. However, you don't find anybody else's DNA. In fact, in this entire case, you don't find a mixed DNA profile, which is rather remarkable. And of course, that's what pricked up the ears of Kathleen Zellner and her DNA expert. But excellent points, Big Jeff. Excellent.
Can't plant sweat. How do you leave that out of the documentary?
Not aired in the Netflix documentary, DNA found inside the hood latch, which, according to Kratz, came from the skin and sweat of Avery's fingers.
The DNA was sweat.
DNA evidence from sweat.
Sweat DNA is not something that, you just carry around with you and slap under the hood of a car.
Prosecutor Ken Kratz says, quote, "You don't want to muddy up a perfectly good conspiracy movie with what actually happened."
The main actor here, everybody believes, is Stephen Avery. He was convicted. He received a life sentence. No possibility of parole. That man's right where he needs to be.
I don't know. I usually consider myself to be part of everyone. And I think that this documentary shows very clearly that everyone doesn't, in fact, believe that Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey committed this crime.
I'd love it if our friend Dr. Silkman could kind of weigh in a little bit on what Kratz is trying to say. To me, it sounds like he's trying to say that if I sort of, held my sweaty hand, or could somehow get my, sweat itself isolated, the perspiration, that perspiration contains DNA. Is that what he's trying to say?
Yeah, that's exactly what he's trying to say. And that's why he hoodwinked everybody. So that's why he looked at the camera saying, well, do you expect people to, and also the other journalist said, well, you don't expect people to be carrying around bottles of sweat and planting sweat, right? And so a lot of people in the community who aren't scientists or have a scientific background are probably thinking, yeah, bloody hell, where did they get this sweat from Stephen from in order to plant it? But the reality is this, guys, pure sweat is a liquid. It doesn't contain DNA. If you slough off skin from your body and it gets mixed up with sweat, a fluid, a medium, then the cells which are present, your skin cells which are present in that sweat, may be deposited on a surface and leave DNA there. So sweat itself doesn't contain DNA. It's the sloughed off skin cells, in other words, touch DNA, that may be deposited on a surface. So he was giving the impression that, hey, are you trying to tell me that the police went around with vials of sweat, placing it underneath the hood? Come on. And so individuals were thinking, yeah, that's right. But they weren't thinking that you can easily plant DNA on the hood latch. Because remember, when the hood latch swab was done, no one noticed any blood. When they went underneath the hood, no one noticed any blood. And they never tested the latch inside the car, right? What you got to pop in order to pop the hood. So these guys are just making up forensics on the fly, right? And how come they never found Stephen's DNA on the door handles? Well, you got to get into the vehicle and out of the vehicle. So that's what I mean by looking at things in a deeper manner rather than what Ken Kratz is spewing out.
Yeah, so just to be clear, Dr. Silkman, not only have you read many technical papers, but you've authored them.
Correct.
Is there a textbook or a technical paper that you can find that actually uses the terminology sweat DNA, or is this a term he invented out of whole cloth?
No, he invented, because remember in the press conference, what was the number one thing he said at least 20 times? Sweaty. Yeah, sweat. Stephen was sweating. And what is interesting, and Jack will back me up on this, there is a phone call, a phone call that he made from his jail cell, and he joked that he sweats during sex. And what did Ken Kratz do? Ken Kratz lifted that straight from the phone call. And guys, we've read his book, right? And what does he say in his book, Jack? He says that I listened to all of the jail calls. So what he's doing is he's molding a story that is believable. And so remember, what did he say was Stephen Avery's motivation to killing Hallback? It was sexually motivated, right? So hence he sweats during sex, right? So he was full of sweat. Of course, he left sweat DNA on the hood. But guys, there's no such thing as sweat DNA. There's touch DNA. And the amount of DNA you leave behind when you touch a surface is very, very minimal. Very little DNA.
Manitowoc County, take a stand. Don't imprison an innocent man.
The Netflix documentary really opened up everybody's eyes. Couldn't sleep, couldn't rest. I knew something had to be done.
We all live on Avery Road.
I don't believe in the corruption in Manitowoc County. I'm 100% behind the police officers.
I think if they have nothing to hide, they would give these two guys retrials.
DNA evidence proved it, so he's guilty. Simple fact.
This could have happened to you. This could have happened to any of your family members.
I have to kill somebody.
I couldn't get there fast enough, Dr. Silkman, but he was convicted by DNA evidence.
That's it.
Proves it. It proves
That's it. You got it. You got it. So this, all jokes aside, this is what people believe. If your DNA is there, you were there. That's it. That's the problem. And if you believe in a planting scenario, so did the planter or planters.
Let me dwell on that a little bit, like you just said. But that's not exactly true. People's DNA has been found in crime scenes where they haven't even been present before.
That's correct. There've been many cases, guys, in which a detective has gone to someone's house to interview them, right? And they weren't wearing gloves, and they were just touching surfaces, or maybe even shook hands with the person that they were interviewing. That detective then went back to the crime scene and started touching things. And guess what? When they did swabs, they found that person's DNA at the crime scene, and that person was nowhere near the crime scene. So you have secondary transfer, right? So it doesn't tell the complete story. And people get into this false sense of security. Just because they found DNA doesn't mean you were there. And there's a classic example of Joe Benet Ramsey. I don't know if you heard of it, where they found male DNA in the underwear of that poor little girl that got murdered. In the underwear. And they thought, oh my God, what the hell is this? And guess what? They traced it to a worker, I believe, in China that had touched the underwear during packaging. And the guy was in China. He was nowhere near Joe Benet Ramsey. So you got to be very careful with the conclusions that you come up with just because you find DNA.
Can I just make the point, Dr. Silkman, that it's an indication versus a confirmation? I guess that's how I can think of it. So the DNA is an indicator that something, there's DNA here. There's this person's DNA. That indicates that there's a potential that they could have, but there's also they leave it open for interpretation. As to the other one, confirmation is saying, well, his DNA was there. It's absolutely him. He's responsible. And I think that that's what the gentleman was saying, his understanding, that he sees it as a confirmation of the crime. And it's not. It's a scientific indicator.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's why you need multiple backups to back up the DNA, not just DNA, right? Because DNA can be manipulated, as we all know.
You can never forget 1985. You can never forget that. it never would have passed muster unless the case against Stephen was a whopper, right? And had this mountain of evidence, all of which we can indicate is pretty much planted from the scenario. They needed that whopper, and that whopper needed to include the prevailing scientific type of evidence at the time, which was DNA. And you can hear it in Jean Couchet's deposition. Can DNA be planted? I mean, that means he's thinking about it, right? The police are thinking about the planting of DNA as a possibility in law enforcement cases. So to me, part of that whopper was there had to be DNA evidence against him. So there's no doubt in my mind that this is planted.
I was going to just shift a little bit and address the comment made from appears to be a supporter when she says, if they've got nothing to hide, why don't they just give these gentlemen another retrial? And I agree. I've always been the firm believer of that. Like, if Manitowoc have got nothing to hide, why not produce everything? Why not say to Kathleen, here, have it all. You're going to find your own client back on it. We've got nothing to hide. We are confident with our verdict. But the sad truth is, in a bigger picture, it's all about, it's political now. It's beyond just doing that. It's about money. It's about, the courts and the law itself. And they're not going to start doing that and making it look like, in their way, in their point of view, like a documentary can have that kind of influence. The last thing they want to do, and I think I was having this discussion with a few people the other day, this is the government, and at the end of the day, they don't want the people to be powerful. They don't want the voices of the people to be able to make a movement where it undermines the court system and the power of the court system, the power of the judges and all that. So sometimes I really do view that making a murderer, as powerful as it was for the community to get Stephen's story out there, I also think that it's bittersweet, because I think sometimes it does him damage too, because some judges, some people in this web of lies in the courts and the states, they will, what's that saying? They will cut their nose to spite their faces. They don't want to be seen as weak to the people that, are trying to make changes and voicing to make changes. They don't want to lose the power.
100% correct, Kelly. Essentially, they want to protect the verdicts, right? Because if you undermine the entire criminal justice system, if there are cracks and issues with the criminal justice system, then everyone in prison is going to complain, right? So Jack will back me up about those two technicians that were working in the drug lab, right? And how they stuffed up 10,000 cases, had to be thrown out because they were meddling with the forensic results from the drug lab, right?
How to fix a drug scandal.
Correct. And the governor was sort of saying, oh, no. It's only 2 cases that were affected. It's local. It's not a problem. Because
yeah, it was disaster.
Yep. As Kelly pointed out, right? You want to have confidence in that when a jury makes a decision, they have made the correct decision. Otherwise, everyone's going to be questioning that decision. But here's the most important thing. You want to make sure that the crime lab handling all the forensics is above board, right? You don't want the crime lab people being influenced by the prosecuting attorneys, right, guys? So the whole system has to work either together or it falls apart.
The sheriff's department framed these.
Don't let Netflix tell you what to think.
When do we want it now? We need justice.
You know what's funny? We haven't even started the episode yet.
Well, this is what I meant by all hell breaks loose in Manitowoc County. I mean, and it does show the power of media. It demonstrates how the power of the masses, and people will organize somewhat. They will get out and show force. They will hold their signs and do their demonstrations, which is an American thing for us to do, to show our opinions on issues. But it really was a phenomenon, bigger than I think, definitely bigger than the filmmakers would have expected. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that they probably always had the idea to continue filming Stephen Avery and the goings-ons in his case. But it's pretty undeniable that they almost had to do a second series because of the success of the first one.
I got no spark at all. I got no spark now at all.
You had spark before?
Yeah.
You know,
with this one I did.
All these envelopes. All them letters are good letters from both the guys, from supporters, that he was innocent and everything else. And here's some woman made this, dedicated to Stephen Avery family. They write like nice letters in it. Oh, this is a picture of me. They call me what they call me. Mama Avery. I told him he better be home for Christmas though. How many Christmases I didn't even make that the last couple of years. What for? Yeah, I don't know.
It's something that touched on me is like how comforting it would be to get mail like that and just feel like you're not alone. You're not alone in this. There are other people around the world who are with you, Mama Avery, as they call her.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, rest in peace, Mama Avery. But I think the important point here is not only is the personal individuals that are placed in prison affected, but the greater family is. And you can tell the emotional burden and scars that she carries. And don't forget, for 18 years, the whole family had to carry the burden of Stephen being accused of the assault of Penny Bernstein, and they knew as parents that Stephen was with them, right? And imagine what it does to your head when the court finds your son guilty of committing such a heinous act and you know that your son was nowhere near there. That's enough to destroy someone, but it goes to show the character and strength and integrity of that woman. Oh my God. You know, most of us would have fallen to pieces, but she held her act together for her son and also her grandson, which is truly remarkable.
I never had a bad letter here. They're all good. You know, some people, they feel really bad and sad and everything happened to me. And, you know, sometimes it feels like you want to cry, but you can't. Once I started, I couldn't stop reading them. I had to go to town and come back and read the rest of them. Kind of shocked sometimes, you know. I didn't think all of these people would care about, you know, this little thing. Seems like I got the whole world for me.
There are still blue ribbons and hearts made of lights on homes and businesses in the Hilbert-Sherwood area where Teresa Halbach lived and was part of the community.
Those that know the Halbach family say they are sickened by the Netflix series and all the attention it is getting.
I just can't get past how badly I feel for her family amid all of this coming up again 10 years later. And just the ultimate sadness over, you know, the death of a person who had a lot to give the world and didn't get the chance to give it.
Now, as some are questioning the guilt of the men convicted for killing Teresa, her friends are trying to focus on keeping her memory as bright as her smile.
She really had electricity or an electric personality. She was always smiling.
She was just the kind of person that you wanted to be friends with when you were in college. Just a really great, solid person.
Just always a happy-go-lucky, typical Midwestern girl.
That's how Teresa Halbach's college friends from UW Green Bay will remember her best.
She'd come in the room and it would just light up.
I don't look at her as someone that was murdered. I look at her as my classmate from UW Green Bay. We were all trying to get our degree and get into the real world, I guess.
You're not taping that, are you?
In 2001, the communications major offered a class trip to Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah. They're all facing pretty much the same direction?
Teresa was really into photography. That was her passion.
I love taking pictures. I love holding the camera in my hand. I love kids. I love babies.
Who knows what she would have turned out to be.
But now I know why there's so much interest coming out of Australia, you guys. Now it all makes sense to me now. Why you guys are so interested in this American case, huh? Because you got to mention in a docuseries. Is that it? Tell me it's not so.
Well, we did get a mention, and all jokes aside, Australia is a beautiful place, and many professional photographers come over here as well to take pictures of our landscape and our wildlife. And I'm so glad that Teresa came down to the land down under, and I'm sure she had a really good time. And that's fantastic.
The communications major offered a class trip to Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah. They're all facing pretty much the same direction?
Teresa was really into photography. That was her passion.
I love taking pictures. I love holding the camera in my hand. I love kids. I love babies.
Who knows what she would have turned out to be. It would have been pretty exciting, I think.
Pause it for a second.
She'll never be able to advance.
Back it up to where it shows that car the first time, right at the beginning of it.
Who knows
Right
what
there.
she would have.
Notice the parking lot? It's intact.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well. Excellent observation.
Do we know approximately when this picture was taken? Would that give us any indication as to?
Yeah, we know exactly when and where that was taken. Yeah. It was taken shortly before. It was taken by the owner of the photography studio.
Tom Pierce. Tom Pierce.
Pierce. Yep. And based on the trees in the background, we know what time of year it was. So obviously, like the October, November, October timeframe, because of that foliage. And we actually, I think the name of the street is John Street, and it was actually our good friend Taff who sort of dreamt up the name, if you will, and discovered where that was. And there's pictures of sort of Google Earth pictures of people have gone there to verify that that's the spot where that picture was taken. So we know that, we know all that.
Unlike the story that we were told that by Mr. Hilgis that Teresa had wrecked that car months before and she just took the insurance money. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Correct. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but has anyone ever been able to find that Hasselblad camera that's in her hand?
That's among the missing.
Right, because that's a very expensive camera, by the way.
Oh, at least $2,000 minimum.
With precious metals, that it's made of precious metals and hard plastics that are not going to vaporize. There would be a remaining of that if you burned it. I'm sorry. You would see it. You'd be like, well, that used to be a camera. I'm sorry, but that's what I believe. You would be able to tell. We would have remains of it. It's just gone.
Yep. And the other thing to note is how spotlessly clean the outside of her car is.
She took good care of it. She was proud of it. That's one point that was made by Pierce, who saw her a lot. That she kept that car very clean because it was her first car, I think, that she bought with her own money, having started up her own business, and she was quite proud of it.
And dare I stir up any controversy, but the color is Mystic Teal Mica.
It's looking very blue in that picture to me, Dr. Silkman.
I just to add my 2 cents in there, I had stumbled upon a website, and I could share that again, and it is where you go to order replacement paint for cars, and in that they have multiple pictures to demonstrate what the paint looks like. They've touched it up, and they go, oh, this is, and so they have multiple pictures of the same RAV4 to demonstrate that their paint will match the color of the paint. And you can see some of them look green and some of them look blue. I'm not trying to stir up any trouble either, but I will share that website.
Would it turn out to be? It would have been pretty exciting, I think. She'll never be able to advance in her career, have a family, spend time with her parents, her siblings. Teresa's gone. It doesn't matter at this point to our side of it, Teresa's friends, her family. Do we want to see the right person convicted? Yeah, I guess, but that's secondary compared to anything else. She's gone, and once she's gone, there's nothing else you can do about that.
You see, this is the fundamental issue. Did you hear what he said? That's secondary. No, it's not secondary if you're wrongfully convicted, right? You want to make sure that you put in the right person or people that committed the murder. It's not secondary to them, right? When Stephen was accused in 1985, it certainly wasn't secondary to him. Fortunately, Penny survived the attack, right? But if she had been murdered, could you imagine the blowback on Stephen and his family? He never would have gotten out of prison. So it goes to show that a horrible, horrible tragedy has occurred. You don't want another tragedy to occur by having the wrong people in prison for something that they didn't do.
And the other side of that, they Vogel and Kosoric, they let Gregory Allen go. He assaults many more women, 2 of them badly. One of them in Minnesota, they didn't find out for years later, and they still didn't really go after him. I mean, he kind of got something, but
he murdered.
He was already in.
It's never been
that
proven, but in North Carolina, I believe, is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
he was a suspect in a murder in North Carolina.
Okay.
Or South Carolina.
He was high. He was a big suspect in that, definitely, but they couldn't prove it. And then, of course, after the Bernstein situation, he assaulted many more, and they didn't want all that to roll back up to the Kosoric and Vogel's doorstep, so they protected it. But for this guy, as Doc was talking about, for this person to just completely ignore basic civil right that we all really are guaranteed under our Constitution, he just completely rolled over that. And I'm thinking to myself, what? No.
Well, here's the fundamental issue, right? You think about it, right? A murder has been committed of a beautiful young person in the prime of her life. Someone has to pay the price for that. So psychologically, you put the blame on Brendan, you put the blame on Stephen. You can't comprehend that they could be innocent, right? Your brain can't comprehend that. So all these people that have been exonerated 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, people who put them in bars never apologize, and they still believe they're guilty because they're fixed in their mind that no, they did commit the crime, right? So it's that off-the-cuff remark just goes to show the attitude. And also, guys, if you're convicted, it's very hard to be released.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think there's a human need for something that we call closure. And we have funerals for people. We say goodbye to them, and that helps us sort of close the book on what happened, to try and come to grips with it. And what happens in wrongful conviction cases is you have sort of the opposite effect. There's not even a psychological term for it. There's no such word as openature. Maybe there ought to be. People don't want to do it. They've closed the books on this emotionally. They've she crossed paths with a psychopath. That's what happened. And they can at least somehow find a way to go on with their life with that knowledge. And if somebody wants to come along and say, well, that's not how it happened, and then all of a sudden brings back that, they don't want to do that. And that's essentially what you're hearing those people say. When they say, oh yeah, do I want the right person in jail? Yeah, but that's secondary to losing this person. It's absolutely, at the risk of raising the ire of certain people in the chat who want to comment on this stuff, it's a logical fallacy to conflate the what a wonderful person Teresa Halbach probably was with the guilt of Stephen Avery or Brendan Dassey. As a matter of fact, it's a tactic used by prosecutors to raise the jury's ire about exactly what Dr. Silkman said. Somebody's got to pay for this, and it's a tactic. It doesn't have anything to do with the guilt of anybody. What a good person she was. So it's while the goodness of her was indeed left out of Man 1, no argument. I think they're trying to make good on that here. It's sort of irrelevant to the guilt of Stephen and Brendan, or even the person who actually did it.
Yeah, 100% correct. And that's exactly the tack that Ken Kratz used during the trial to get the sentimentality of the judge and the jury, and the way Ken Kratz portrayed Teresa almost as angelic, right? And Stephen Avery as the monster. And that was the tactic used right throughout the trial in order to gain sympathy.
Well, you got a lot of them now?
Yeah, the past couple of days I've been getting 20 of them.
Oh.
Like my stack is up to 38 now.
Ooh, you better start writing.
That's what I'm trying to do, but every time I try to catch up, I get another fucking 20 of them. After a while, my hand starts to hurt.
These are the ones that we had at the protest. He loves all his supporters. He gets anywhere from 30 to 100 letters a week. And that was in the beginning, and he's still getting that. I knew that there was a lot of people out there that cared. It makes me feel good.
I don't know, it just makes me sad. That, not sad in a way, it's sad happy that people take time to do this for him. Some amazing people out there.
This blanket here was made from a lady from Arizona for Brendan. Pictures of Brendan, little sayings. Just pictures of my sweet little angel.
I didn't know what to tell everybody at the time. I was really afraid for him. I was thinking, well, Brendan, did you really do it? I mean, you know, you're getting put away for life. You know, I forgot what was going through my mind because I probably want to get rid of it. You know, but it sure wasn't really good stuff, I tell you. I couldn't believe that he was even a part of it, because the Brendan I know wouldn't even pull wings off of a fly. He just sits in his video game room and, you know, leaves you alone. You know, that's why I said he did all these things, you know. It's impossible. I guess they interviewed all the rest of the boys, you know, like Bobby, Brian, but they didn't fall for all that, so it didn't take them long for, you know, like Brendan, he's so kind of sucked in with that. So he's a lot like me, a slow learner, which I'm not saying it's bad, but they never really gave him a chance, you know.
I really like to hear this coming through his father's words. You know, a lot of people have said similar things about the situation, but hearing it from his father, it adds relevance, it adds weight to it. So I think this is a really powerful moment.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jeff. And, you know, Pete Dassey is actually a frequent guest of Paul Capaldi, you know, who is a staunch supporter from Scotland. You know, his words are just as powerful on Paul's channel as they are right now. And, you know, it hurts to see the family, who's obviously suffering, as Dr. Silkman indicated in the beginning. What a tremendous impact as it has in the family. And haven't we really, you know, and you like to talk about those folksy little sayings, right? It's taken us many words to sort of talk about, to say why we think Brendan is innocent. But Pete just sums it up, right? That's not the kid he was. You know, the kid that I know wouldn't even hurt a fly.
That's right. And that part that sticks out to me the most of his statements was the other boys didn't fall for it. They weren't falling for it. And Brendan was manipulated.
And I think that's very telling, as Big Jeff said, coming from his biological father, because, you know, he's going to know how his son is. In fact, Brendan has got a very similar personality to his dad, right? Like, keep things simple, keep things uncomplicated. But he made a very, very important point in that the other boys caught wind of what law enforcement were trying to do, whereas Paul Brendan didn't have the mental capacity or strength to overcome the coercion of him. He had no idea what they were doing to him, which is really, really sad.
Yeah, I built those, and every year they come and raise their babies here, and then at a certain time of the year, there's one right up there now. See, they're going after a hawk. They come in 3 or 4 months, they have their young, and then they go back to Brazil. And so that's a thing I've been doing this is about my 10th year now.
So you're coming up Sunday afternoon then, huh?
No, we'll be there Sunday morning.
Yeah, Sunday morning sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier than last Sunday.
Yeah.
We didn't get home until 10 to 7 at night.
Yeah.
He was in Green Bay. They moved him back to Columbia. That's almost 3 hours away. So now I don't get up there as much. What I'd like to, but working and, you know, doing the stuff around here that I gotta do, it's hard to get up there all the time.
So much of post-conviction work is emotional at this point. You know, you come on board a case at the lowest point for a person. They've just been convicted. They're in that hole. It's a black moment for them. This stuff takes years. It can take decades. The fights are so long, and they can get ugly, and they can be painful. So, you know, you have faith, you believe in your client. The truth is a really hard thing to cover up for too long, especially in a case like this where it's just sitting there. The truth is just sitting there on the interrogation tape. All you have to do is persuade someone to take that close and careful look at it.
And Laura Nyrider made a very important comment. You can't hide the truth all the time, right? You think from Brendan Dassey's perspective, how can someone like himself never admit to having committed this horrendous crime against Teresa, right? You look at him, he's carried on normal. He's carried on, he's held his head high. He's never said, look, if I admit my guilt, I'm going to potentially get out early. So both Stephen and Brendan, over a long period of time, have maintained their innocence, right? And remember, Jack, the irony that if Stephen had admitted to the sexual assault of Penny Bernstein, he would have gotten out of prison early.
That's right.
That's
Exactly
the
right.
irony. That's the irony.
So we're going to have to leave this section for next week. It's a little teaser as to what we'll see coming up next week. I think so far this is set a different tone where I can feel it building. I don't think that we're just kind of unfolding this envelope. We're opening the cupboard door. We're looking inside. We're just starting to get those first pieces. So with that said, following tradition, I will hand the floor over to Big Jeff for some wrap-up comments this week. And I just want to say thanks to everybody out there and welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. I think the first part of the first episode that we watched really does make the words of the panel hold true, and that Ma'am 2 is a different beast. I think they corrected the omission of the life of Teresa Hallback, which wasn't included very much in Ma'am 1. Here, that was a big complaint, and I think they appropriately addressed it. You can see we're going to begin to get into the work of Kathleen Zellner and the work of Steve Drizzen, who's on the screen right now, and Kathleen Zellner. So very much looking forward to that. The narrative really hasn't opened yet. I think that we alluded to a lot of the evidence that we're going to see. I think we already eviscerated Sweaty Boy Ken, and looking forward to continuing. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Big Jeff. And Jack, wrap up.
Final words on the opening. It really did ignite, as you talked about in the beginning. It really, Ma'am really did ignite Manitowoc, and you could see that in a lot of the protests, the back and forth. It created a pretty large firestorm with a lot of people. Some, as we talked about, went too far with it, way too far. But we do get to see, as we move forward into these next several parts. As Jeff talked about, Kathleen and showcasing her experts and her dismantling, deconstructing the state's case and what they built, and other people too. So, yeah, really looking forward to it.
Dr. Silkman, if you give your wrap.
I knew we weren't going to get too far in the episode, but it goes to show how passionate we are as a panel. There are so many things that we can cover now, but I just want to give a little bit of kudos to the filmmakers, because when you think about it, this is a pretty complex tapestry of two independent stories which are interwoven together, right? And somehow they do such a great job captivating all the critical elements of what happened to Stephen, what happened to Brendan, and the fact that they're now, Stephen is now being represented by a high-flying attorney in Kathleen Zellner, and Laura Nyrider and Stephen Drizzen are looking after Brendan Dassey. So it really builds up a really good stage for future episodes. And yes, as everyone has said on the panel, I can't wait until the forensics comes in and how Kathleen Zellner and her team of experts begins to demolish that forensic evidence. Really looking forward to it, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. And Kelly, if you wouldn't lead us out.
Actually, I don't have really anything to say in terms of a final thought. I think we kind of covered it as we went along in this episode. I think we opened it up. We addressed what we were going to see, which we've all said. It's a new flavor. And I'm really looking forward to more of the narrative of Kathleen, because she brings so much power, and I just can't wait to incorporate what we know now into what we see in this. So I think it's going to be really fun. Again, not probably the right word to use the word fun, but you know what I mean, in terms of I think it's going to bring some interesting conversations.
Absolutely. A lot of interesting conversations to be had about this one. And yeah, we barely touched anything about Kathleen Zeller. I think it's a really good point, Kelly. There's a lot of talk in the space. You know, we have that video out that we did discussing the motion, taking a look at what, you know, our first reactions. And we plan to put out, you know, probably another video about the motion. We're not done talking about the motion at all. And KZ's part is coming up thick. We haven't quite gotten to that yet in this first segment, but we can feel something building here. I just want to say thanks to everybody who has followed us all the way through season 1 and is welcoming us back to their podcast world. Thanks to Jack, Kelly, Dr. Silkman, and Big Jeff. This has been Discussing a Murderer.